The pounding on my front door nearly shook it off the hinges. "Open up! You're under arrest!" The voice that bellowed through the wood was rough, practiced, but a little too theatrical, like someone who had watched too many crime dramas and decided to play cop for the day. For a second, I froze. The ceramic mug in my hand was still steaming, fresh coffee sending its warmth into my fingers. Arrest? Me? That word carried weight, a word I had spent my career wielding against criminals, liars and cheats. But now it had been flung at me in my own home, on a quiet Saturday morning when the only sound I should have been hearing was the rustle of my newspaper and the occasional bark of a dog down the street. I set the mug down on the table beside me, deliberately slow, my ears straining for more sounds beyond the door. Heavy footsteps shuffled outside, 2, maybe 3 people. A short hiss of whispered conversation followed, not the clipped radio chatter of real officers, but hurried, uncertain words they didn't want me to hear. That told me more in those 10 seconds than any badge they could flash ever would. Still, curiosity pressed me forward. I twisted the deadbolt, swung the door open, and stared into the faces of 2 men dressed in cheap-looking navy blue uniforms. The fabric was wrong, thin, shiny, and wrinkled in a way no real department-issued gear ever was. The badges on their chests glinted, catching the morning sun, but even from 2 feet away, I could tell they were fakes. The metal looked light, flimsy like the kind sold at novelty shops. "Step outside," one of them ordered sharply. He was tall, lean, his jaw covered in uneven stubble, the kind of man who thought raising his voice would make up for his lack of authority. His partner, shorter and bulkier, stood just behind him gripping a folded paper in his hand, waving it like it was the Magna Carta. "You're in violation of HOA regulations," the tall one continued, shoving his shoulder into the doorway as if to force me back. "You're coming with us," I blinked. "HOA regulations?" I repeated, letting my tone carry disbelief. The shorter man smirked, flicking the paper open with unnecessary drama. It was meant to look like a warrant, but the fonts were mismatched, the text uneven, and the seal at the bottom was the wrong color entirely. Whoever made it must have thought slapping an eagle clip art image on a document instantly made it legal. "This is your arrest warrant," he declared proudly, thrusting it at me. "You failed to comply with multiple citations regarding your property's lawn height, exterior paint, and—" he glanced at the page. "Unauthorized decorative lighting." My eyes flicked past the paper to the 2 of them, studying every detail. Their belts were empty, no real sidearms, no radios, no tasers, just toy-grade handcuffs dangling from one man's hip like an afterthought. Their shoes weren't standard issue either. One wore muddy sneakers, the other scuffed dress shoes. My years of training had taught me how to dissect suspects in seconds, and these 2 were failing every test in the book. But I wasn't ready to reveal my hand just yet. I leaned casually against the doorframe, arms folded. "Interesting," I said lightly, as though they had just accused me of jaywalking. "And who exactly are you 2 supposed to be?" The tall one squared his shoulders. "We're officers working under directive of the HOA board. This is official business." His voice cracked slightly on official, betraying nerves he tried to mask with volume. I raised an eyebrow. "HOA officers," I repeated slowly, like I was trying to digest the absurdity. "That's right," the shorter one added quickly. "And refusal to comply will only make things worse for you." A flicker of amusement tugged at my lips. It was almost comical. The fake warrant, the dollar store uniforms, the bad acting. But under the humor, a spark of anger burned. They had come onto my property, into my home space, and tried to intimidate me. They thought they could dress up like cops and bully me into submission. I tilted my head, examining them the way a cat studies 2 mice that have wandered too close. "So let me get this straight," I said, voice calm but edged. "You're here to arrest me, because of lawn height and decorative lights." "Don't make this difficult," the tall one snapped. He took a step forward, clearly frustrated, that I wasn't shaking in fear like he'd hoped. "Step outside. Hands where we can see them." I almost laughed outright. My hand brushed against the edge of the door, steadying myself. In all my years, I'd faced drug traffickers with real guns, gang leaders with real power, and con men with schemes far more sophisticated than this clown act. But never, not once, had I been confronted by two imposters trying to play police on behalf of a homeowners association. The short one's eyes darted nervously, scanning behind me into the living room. He was searching for signs of compliance, maybe expecting me to have a packed bag ready, like I'd been waiting for them. Instead, he found my family photos lining the wall, the commendations framed from years of service, and the small, locked case that held my real service pistol. His throat bobbed as he swallowed hard. "You need to come with us now," he repeated, but the words lacked the conviction they had earlier. His partner shot him a sharp look, like a director scolding an actor who'd forgotten his lines. I let the silence stretch, let them squirm in it. Then I asked, almost too casually, "Do you two even know who I am?" That stopped them cold. The tall one faltered for the first time, his mouth opening and closing like he'd lost his script. The short one blinked, glanced at the paper in his hand and stuttered, You're the homeowner in violation." I smiled thinly. "Is that what it says?" The tension in the air thickened. The fake officers shifted uncomfortably, their confidence unraveling in the face of my calmness. They expected resistance, maybe yelling, maybe panic, but not composure. Certainly not the measured, steady tone of a man who had spent decades commanding real officers, running real operations, holding real authority. I didn't reach for my badge yet. No, not yet. I wanted to see how far they would push this charade, how deep into their lies they would go. Because the truth is, people reveal themselves under pressure, and I was about to apply plenty of it. I leaned forward slightly, voice dropping into something lower, heavier. "Tell me your names." The tall one's jaw clenched. "That's classified," I chuckled. "Classified? You're detaining a citizen and your names are classified? That's not how it works." "Don't get smart with us," the shorter one snapped, but his voice wavered. "I'm not getting smart," I said smoothly. "I'm giving you a chance, one chance. Because right now, what I see are two men trespassing on private property, impersonating law enforcement, and attempting to commit unlawful arrest. Do you have the faintest idea how serious that is?" Their silence was answer enough. The morning. Air seemed to shift, the chirping of birds in the distance suddenly louder against the thick quiet between us. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down, the absurdity mixing with a darker edge. Because while part of me found this laughable, another part recognized the danger. Men like this, desperate and reckless, could do real harm if cornered. Kept my stance relaxed but ready. If they lunged, I was prepared. If they tried to run, I'd let them go only long enough to gather the evidence I needed. The tall one finally spoke, his voice lower now. "Look, just cooperate, and we'll make this easy." I let the words hang in the air, then, slowly, deliberately I smiled, a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Gentlemen," I said softly, "you've made a very big mistake knocking on this door." I let their words echo in the silence for a moment, pretending to mull them over, as if I were truly considering compliance. The tall one shifted his weight impatiently, tapping his foot against the concrete porch, and the shorter one's eyes kept darting toward the street like he expected backup that was never going to arrive. It was almost too easy to read them. Nervous liars always looked for escape routes. "All right," I said finally, my voice calm, even agreeable. "If you want me to step outside, fine." I moved slowly, deliberately, every gesture calculated. I extended my hands, palms open, giving them the show they wanted. The tall one exhaled, shoulders sagging in relief, mistaking my compliance for surrender. He stepped forward, producing the toy-grade handcuffs that jingled faintly with the sound of cheap metal. He was clumsy, almost overeager, like a rookie arresting his first suspect. When he reached for my wrist, I chuckled softly, so quiet he almost didn't catch it. The sound made him pause, his brows knitting. "Something funny?" he demanded. Turned my head, meeting his eyes with a steady gaze. "Yeah," I said. "You." Before he could react, I tilted my wrist, letting him fumble with the cuffs. They clicked weakly around my wrist, so loose they slid halfway down my hand. I raised my arm, shook once, and the cuff slipped free, dangling uselessly from my thumb. The short one's face drained of color. "What the hell?" the tall one stammered. "Tell me," I said, holding the cuff up between us. "Did you get these from a Halloween store? Or was it the toy aisle at Walmart?" Their act was crumbling fast. Panic flickered in the shorter man's eyes, and he took a step back, his hand twitching toward the fake warrant, as if waving it harder would make it real. "You think this is a joke?" he snapped, though his voice cracked on the last word. "No," I said, lowering my voice until it had the weight of steel. "I think it's a crime." That's when I reached into my jacket, slowly, deliberately. The two men stiffened, their shoulders jerking in anticipation of a weapon. Their eyes widened as I pulled out my badge, the real one. Polished, heavy, official. The golden emblem of the chief of police. The transformation on their faces was immediate. Shock, disbelief, then sheer terror. I let the badge catch the morning light, tilting it just enough so the engraving gleamed. "I'm the one man in this entire city you shouldn't have tried this with," I said. My voice was calm, but under it was the unmistakable authority of someone who had ordered raids, commanded squads, and taken down men far more dangerous than these frauds. The tall ones, mouth opened, closed, opened again. Words refused to form. The short one's lips moved, stuttering fragments of excuses that tumbled over each other like broken glass. We were just, it was, spare me," I cut him off. "You were impersonating officers of the law on private property, attempting to execute a fake arrest. Do you have any idea how much prison time that carries?" The tall one finally found his voice, though it was trembling. "We were just following orders from the HOA board. They said if you wouldn't comply, we were to... His voice trailed off into silence, as if saying the rest out loud might summon a demon. "Arrest me?" I finished for him. "Drag me out of my own home? Maybe rough me up a little? That sound about right?" Neither answered. They didn't have to. Guilt was written all over them. I stepped closer, and both men instinctively shrank back, like prey animals cornered by a predator they hadn't realized was stalking them. My shadow fell across their cheap uniforms, and I held their gaze without blinking. "You picked the wrong house," I said coldly. For a moment, nobody moved. Even the air felt heavier, weighed down by the reality of what had just unfolded. The short one's breathing quickened, shallow and rapid, and sweat began to bead on his forehead. The tall one's hands clenched into fists, not out of defiance, but out of the desperate urge to keep from shaking. "You don't understand," the short one whispered finally, almost pleading. "They made us do this. The HOA president, he said you weren't listening. He said you needed to be taught a lesson. We didn't have a choice." I tilted my head. "There's always a choice." "No, you don't get it," the tall one blurted, his voice cracking. "They said if we didn't go through with it, we'd be fined, evicted, ruined. We just wanted to keep our homes. Please, we didn't mean to what?" I snapped. "Didn't mean to impersonate law enforcement? Didn't mean to wave a fake warrant in my face? Didn't mean to trespass onto my property and try to drag me away?" I took another step forward, my voice rising like the rumble of thunder. "Intent doesn't erase the crime." The short one's legs gave out and he collapsed onto the porch steps, his head dropping into his hands. The tall one swallowed hard, trying to keep his composure. but every second under my glare broke him down further. I pulled my phone from my pocket, scrolling with calm precision. You know what happens next, don't you? Their silence was answer enough. Within 5 minutes, I continued, real squad cars are going to be parked out front. Real officers will be here, and you're going to be in real handcuffs. Not the kind that slip off with a shake of the wrist. I tossed the toy cuffs onto the ground at their feet, the metal clattering like a gavel striking judgment. The short one whimpered. The tall one finally cracked, his voice desperate. Please. Chief, we didn't want this. It was all the HOA. We'll tell you everything, I swear. Just don't send us to prison. I studied them for a long, quiet moment. Fear rolled off them in waves, their bravado stripped away, leaving only 2 desperate men caught in a game. They didn't understand. You're going to tell me everything, I said at last. My voice was steady, measured. And then you're going to face the consequences. Because this neighborhood, it doesn't belong to the HOA, it belongs to the law, and the law answers to me. I turned my head slightly, catching movement at the edge of the street. A car creeping by, slowing just enough for the driver to peek through the window before speeding off. I knew that face. The HOA president himself, skulking in the shadows, making sure his plan was being carried out. Jaw tightened. Oh, he wasn't going to slip away from this. Not today. The tall one followed my gaze and realized what I was staring at. His lips parted, and the words slipped out before he could stop them. He's watching us. He's always watching us. The shorter one whimpered again, rocking on the step like a child. We're dead. We're already dead. I crouched down so my eyes were level with theirs. Not dead, I said softly. But finished? Yes. Because this ends now. And then I made the call. 3 digits. A code phrase my officers knew by heart. Within minutes, the sound of sirens pierced the air, growing louder, closer. The 2 imposters flinched, their heads snapping toward the street as flashing lights reflected off windows and polished car doors. Real squad cars, real officers. I straightened, slipping my badge back into my jacket. You're about to find out, I told them, my voice hard as steel, what it feels like to be on the other side of the law. The tall one started begging again, words tumbling over each other in a frantic rush. The short one just wept silently, his shoulders shaking. Neither of them noticed that my focus had shifted, that my eyes weren't on them anymore. They were on the car disappearing down the block, the HOA president fleeing before the net closed in. And I knew without a doubt that tonight, before the sun rose again, he'd be the one wearing the cuffs. The sirens cut through the neighborhood like blades of sound, sharp and impossible to ignore. One by one, curtains lifted in the houses across the street, neighbors peeking through blinds and half-open windows, their morning peace shattered by the sight of flashing red and blue lights flooding our cul-de-sac. Dogs barked, children pressed, their faces to the glass, and the whole community stirred like a hive rattled from its nest. The squad cars pulled in fast and hard, tires crunching against the curb. Doors flew open, and my officers poured out in formation, real uniforms gleaming, real weapons at their hips, real authority in every stride. They didn't need to ask questions when they saw me standing on the porch with 2 trembling imposters. At my feet, my presence, my badge, told them everything they needed to know. Chief? One of my sergeants called out as he jogged up the walkway, his eyes flicking from me to the pathetic scene of the 2 fake officers. They're yours, I said simply, gesturing toward the men. Charges: impersonating law enforcement, unlawful attempt at detainment, trespassing, conspiracy. My tone was clipped, professional, but beneath it I could feel the heat of my anger simmering. The imposters tried to stammer excuses, tried to protest, but they weren't given the courtesy of being heard. My sergeant yanked their arms behind their backs and slapped on real cuffs, the heavy metallic clink echoing louder than their protests. Their toy cuffs lay abandoned in the dirt, a symbol of their pathetic attempt at deception. As they were dragged toward the waiting cars, one of them twisted his head toward me, desperation etched in every line of his face. "It wasn't us, it was him, the HOA president. He told us to—" His words were cut off by the car door slamming shut. I didn't need the confession. I already knew. My gaze shifted to the end of the block where I'd last seen the HOA president's car slinking away, a coward, sending others to do his dirty work while he watched from the shadows. But now his game was over. He'd played his last hand, and it had blown up in his face. I turned to my sergeant. "Get statements from them, every word, and then run it up T." The HOA president was already at the door before we even knocked, his silhouette framed in the glow of his ornate porch light. He must have been watching us approach on his cameras, but he still tried to play it cool, his face arranged into a smug practice smile. "Chief," he said smoothly, as if greeting an old friend. "What a surprise. To what do I owe this visit?" I stared at him for a long moment, saying nothing, letting the silence weigh him down. Then I spoke, my voice low but carrying. "You know exactly why I'm here." His smile faltered for just a fraction of a second, then snapped back into place. "I'm afraid I don't follow. I've been home all day, tending to HOA matters, nothing unusual." Behind me, one of my officers stepped forward and produced a folder thick with paperwork. "Signed statements from your enforcers," she said, her tone sharp. "They put it all on you. Every order, every threat, every instruction." For the first time, I saw the mask slip. A flicker of panic, gone as quickly as it came, but I caught it. He tried to recover with a scoff. "You can't possibly take the word of those two degenerates. Known troublemakers, both of them. Hardly credible." I stepped closer until I was on his porch, the space between us shrinking. "Credible enough when the evidence matches," I said. "Phone records, emails, financial transfers. You left a trail, and we followed it." His jaw tightened. The smug smile wavered again, his composure crumbling at the edges. "This is outrageous," he snapped, his voice rising. "I am the elected president of this association. You can't just waltz up here and—" I cut him off with a single word. "Cuff him." The command was met instantly. My officers surged forward, grabbing his arms before he could retreat. He thrashed, shouted, tried to twist free, but the cuffs clicked shut around his wrists with a finality that silenced the night. His voice cracked as he screamed, "You can't do this. Sue, I'll ruin you." I leaned in close. My words meant only for him. "You already tried." The neighborhood had gathered again, drawn by the commotion. Porch lights flickered on one by one, casting the street in pale yellow glow. Families stood in clusters watching, as the man who had ruled their lives with fines, threats, and petty tyranny was dragged away in handcuffs. Their faces were a mix of shock and satisfaction, fear and relief. One woman whispered, "Finally." Another man muttered, "About time." As my officers loaded the HOA president into the back of the squad car, he pressed his face to the window, spitting venom with every breath. But the words didn't matter anymore. The image spoke louder, the self-proclaimed king reduced to a prisoner, his throne stripped away in front of the very people he'd lorded over. I stood there, the cool night air brushing against my face, listening to the quiet hum of the street returning to normal. The balance had shifted. The HOA's reign of intimidation was over, dismantled in a single night. When the last squad car pulled away, silence settled over the block again. Neighbors lingered for a moment, exchanging looks, then slowly retreated back inside. Their lives, forever altered but safer now. I walked back toward my own house, my coffee still sitting where I'd left it that morning. I picked it up, cold but familiar, and took a long sip. A smile tugged at my lips as I whispered to the empty room. Arrested. By the very man you tried to frame. And with that, I set the cup down, the night finally at peace.